We're looking at the movements and motives of Edward Snowden. Catch me if you can, you might say. He was expected to fly on to Cuba. It was trumpeted, but our Moscow correspondent telling us in part one of this discussion that it appears that he was not on the flight. In fact, it's not even a certainty that he's in Moscow at this very moment. With us to talk about it, Arship Yepmou, president of Internet Without Borders. Internet Without Borders, an advocacy group that helps people access the web throughout the world, including in some far-flung places.
And to protect their data.
And to protect their data. Also with us, Stéphane Grumbach, computer scientist, author of Data Harvesting 2.0, somebody who keeps a close eye on how large swathes of our cyber data it moves around, especially in places like the United States and China. And Guillaume Gralet, a French web journalist, is back with us, as well as from Amsterdam, Matt Holridge, surveillance industry consultant. We're talking about Edward Snowden. Remember again, 30 years old, an American consultant or intern with a group called Booz Allen at their Hong Kong office. He was not a government employee. He was a consultant, disturbed by the wide brief he had.
I, sitting at my desk, certainly had the authorities to wiretap anyone, from you or your accountant to a federal judge to even the president if I had a personal email.
Matt Holridge?
Yes, I see an inconsistency in his story in that he claims to have this great power to read all these databases. If it's so, he should have been able to find the right sources to speak to about these abuses. The FBI has a long history of prosecuting people, powerful people in the US government, including politicians. And I know if I was in Edward's shoes and saw some great abuse, I would find the right person in the FBI to bring this to.
Even if you're on foreign soil?
Yeah, well, the FBI operates all over the world. And again, he says he has enough power to read all these databases. It shouldn't be hard to find a good, uncorruptible source of at the FBI to bring this to.
So what's wrong with The Guardian?
What's wrong with The Guardian? Well, I think the first step, again, should have been internal. If you have nowhere else to go, then sure, you can turn to the journalists.
Guillaume Gallet?
I would allude to Daniel Ellsberg that, with the Pentagon Papers during the Vietnam War, did exactly the same thing, going to the newspaper at that time. At the time, it was considered as a betrayal as well. He was condemned, and it took a little bit of time.
He was a government employee, though.
Exactly. It took a little bit of time for Daniel Ellsberg to be considered as a hero.
Yes, and he's supporting Snowden.
And the Guardian revealed also the process of how Snowden get to them and why he chose this newspaper for the revelation. So what can be had is that and during his last interview to the Guardian, he said he quoted Benjamin Franklin, who said that there's no freedom. The exact quote is there's those who try to surrender freedom for security doesn't deserve either one. So I think it's a sum up of what's going on now. We can address a parallel with this sentence, with this quote, with the last sentence of President Obama on this. He said 100% privacy, 100% security. We have to find the right balance. So I think all ideas are not dead. The ideas like due process, like privacy, or these ideas are founding the principles of our democracy. So we cannot say, okay, we are in a new era, and all these principles can be put in the trash. So.
All right, we have one comment here on Twitter. With the NSA's prison program recently revealed, I wonder what other dirty secrets Ed Snowden will show us next. I can only imagine. But Daniel Grumbach, what dirty secrets exactly has he revealed so far for you? What surprised you?
Well, the mechanisms that the NSA was using to access the data, and in particular, I mean, first there was the revelation on the Verizon telecom operator, where the NSA gets the connections. and then the PRISM program, where they can directly access the data from users of the large web corporations. And I think this is extremely important, and it's extremely important.
And your job is to look into movements of big data. You're surprised by this?
No, I'm not surprised by that. Actually, I spent many years in China, and I've seen the Chinese industry emerging just behind the US, just a few months after with a few months delay. Now, China has corporations that are the same size as the US, so with hundreds of millions of users. One thing that strikes me is that there are no web corporations in Europe. And Europeans claim they have values, and they have a specific vision on privacy in particular. But this, there is a huge contradiction in Europe, which is that European governments are claiming they have values and they want to defend these values, but they have no corporations, and they have no corporation that would implement these values.
The corporations are all American, and those American corporations, well, they've been speaking out. They were named, the ones that were named in the PRISM affair. They've put out statements. We can show you a couple at this time. Here's one from Google. Google does not have a, quote, backdoor for the government to access private user data. We can show you another one from Apple. We've never heard of PRISM. We do not provide any government agency with direct access to our servers, and any agency requesting customer data must get a court order. Guillaume, are they telling the truth?
They might tell the truth, but the truth is that the NSA, following the Patriot Act, has direct access to those data. I'm not saying that we should.
So what are you saying? They don't need to know?
Yeah, they don't need to know, and maybe the NSA is doing that directly. You know, the NSA is building a huge data center in Utah, and they can collect any data they want, and the laws authorizes them to do that. I'm not saying we should not fight against terrorism, but the main thing here is that the US citizens and citizens from all over the world were not aware of this. We are not aware of this surveillance. And there are some ways of doing things differently. If you look at the American website DuckDuckGo or the French one Quant, they are not collecting data from the user, so they are good search engines.
You mentioned DuckDuckGo the past few weeks, a growing cottage industry, alternative search engines.
Hi, I'm Dax. I'd like to tell you about DuckDuckGo, my search engine. DuckDuckGo has way better instant answers, way less spam and clutter, and real privacy. This is my homepage. Let's do a search.
Does DuckDuckGo deliver on what it says it does? Is it really with less spam and clutter, and you really have more privacy?
Yeah, exactly. They're not collecting data if the user is not aware of. And I spoke to the founder. I think he's telling the truth. It's quite a good search engine. Of course, you won't find as much data as on Google, but it's quite interesting to see that could do a difference.
Matt Holridge, would you use this kind of search engine?
Oh, if it brings me some value, sure. Again, I have nothing to hide. So it's all about value. Value-added services to the customers will succeed. That Google has proven that.
So you think it's okay for Google to use that data because it helps the consumer?
Again, it's the consumer who's voting by entering in or by participating with Google or these other services and saying, yeah, I like the results of this service. So effectively it is, we should be warning the public of the possible downsides, and that's the role of government.
Yes, I think it belongs to it's a debate that we can the debate on how to ensure that our constitutional principles, with our privacy, with the secrecy of our mail, etc., are in the era of the internet, in the era of the big data, how these principles can be, how we can debate on how to protect these data. That's the first thing. And the second thing about Google, I think they may be maybe they are saying the truth that okay, we don't have a secret door, but we can also think that this story tells us about the real tables of power. Why? Because I remember that, for instance, the former president of Google was asking by President Obama to be a Secretary of Treasury. So we have the alliance. What can be a fatal alliance for our democracy? The alliance between big government and big companies. That's why, as citizens, we have to address this situation and to reflect of what's really going on with our societies, our democratic societies.
Stéphane Grumbach, one of his papers I was reading when we were preparing, was saying how something like more than half the companies in the world that are from the United States. Add to those of China, and you've got, more than 3/4?
Yeah, most of the web companies, I mean, if you take the top web companies in the world, most of them are American. Then the next country would be China.
And listening to Al-Sheep, it sounds like there's a little bit of collusion between the U.S. government and these private companies.
Well, there is definitely a question. There was a paper before the Snowden case that was published in the Washington Post, where they were arguing on democratic principles, and they were saying, in fact, Google, by just changing slightly the result of the search, could change the result of a presidential election. So without even analyzing data and personal data, just by switching the results.
Guillaume Gralet.
I think the Chinese web will run the world in the next 10 years because, if you consider the numbers of web surfers in China, they are gaining every year 70 million, which is size of France in terms of internet surfers. So the web giants will be Chinese. But the main thing...
But if consumers don't trust those search engines or those web giants.
Exactly, François, you're exactly right, because the main thing here is the confusion. For example, if you look at Google has got huge revenues coming from advertisement, from AdWords, etc., and everyone knows that. But at the same time, Google is scanning all the mails from Gmail, and is not obliged to do that, and that the main thing here is trust, especially if Google wants to succeed with Google Glass, for example. You're gonna have lots of data, from your Google Plus profile. If you go on the street and you cross someone who's on Gmail as well. So the main battle here is trust, and people thought that only Chinese were monitoring our emails. No, we know that everyone's doing it, except it's a few exceptions.
Yeah, but it's a difficult problem because technically the services that you'll have in the future, I mean, you'll be essentially talking to your computer the way you're talking to a person. I mean, this is what Google now or Apple Siri will want to achieve. And obviously the computer or the companies handling the services, they know a lot about you. Otherwise, they couldn't be able to talk to you as a human. And not only they know a lot about you, but they have to analyze this data. Now, if Google does, like the other web corporations, if they do most of their added value now on advertisements, this will change. I mean, obviously, this economy will evolve towards having added value, not only on targeting individuals and having profiles and ads, but on targeting communities. So this started 10 years ago. Essentially, I think the first very powerful system was Google Flu that monitors flu all around the world.
Right.
But if Google can monitor flu, it can monitor any topic.
Of course, yeah. But you may monitor any community, but you should anonymize data. And I think that people will be ready to pay to anonymize their data.
But it's very hard to anonymize data.
Yes. For us, the fundamental question is who is monitoring those who monitor. I mean,
we have a tweet here from Butler who says the people deserve to know that personal information is being tapped without their consent.
Exactly. So the question you're telling that is true that the cyberspace today is based. Radically is going through the big data and to the analyze and to the mining of your data, etc. But how to protect this data with this new situation?
Is it doable?
It's possible. It's possible. The fact is. How is it that simple analysts can judge if they can wiretape my communication or my emails? I think. there can be rules on who is, for instance, who is consulting my data. For instance, in these agencies, there can be more verification, more justifications on why to protect us, because the question of security exists. So I think that today the U.S. government doesn't give us the proof that there are some rules on how these agents are spying us. So
there should be more pressure applied, you're saying. Snake's asking this question: who needs PRISM when 36 million people already voluntarily friended Barack Obama on Facebook? Guillaume Gralet, especially people, you heard Matt Holrich saying he's got nothing to hide. A lot of people say, I don't care.
Yeah, but I think that's true, exactly, voluntary. But the main thing here is going to be a huge political debate on who should govern the web. And if you look, there is a battle between the US, basically, and ITU, which is the UN. But there is also another battle that's going to happen in Europe, at the European Commission, with the right to be forgotten. If you speak to some Facebook executives, they will say that this law shouldn't pass because this law could be a catastrophe for Facebook, for example, because the right to be forgotten should be if you cancel your Facebook account, you cancel every picture you put on it. And Facebook doesn't want you to do that.
All right, and there's one person who's been monitoring all of this very closely, and that's our very own Nicholas Rushworth, who we can say hello to now. Hello, Nicholas.
Hi, everyone.
Time for the Media Buzz segment of our show. Nicholas, this issue of PRISM, of whether Edward Snowden's a whistleblower or a traitor, whether or not it matters if Facebook has your data, you've been looking at it.
One of the points that came up in the conversation was this whole question of the democratic deficit. There's somebody somewhere doing something against you. That's the feeling, isn't it? And so I saw this in, of all places, Le Monde's blog, which is Big Browser, which, if you say it with a French accent, is Big Browser.
Big Browser, yeah.
So that's kind of like Big Brother, isn't it? Let's go to that. There you can see the headline there. Créez votre propre programme PRISM à la maison. Do your own PRISM at the house.
Make your own.
DIY spy. And so obviously this is really about the technology, which is obviously you guys are much more expert at it than me. But if we go to this story in Computer World, there you can see how to run your own NSA spy program. And the argument in the piece, which is 4 pages long, which is that you would accumulate masses of metadata. Now, metadata is that information about the stuff you write in the background. It's not the content of the call or the email. And with that metadata, you can with Google massive storage space, Google Alerts, Google Hangouts, Google everything.
And for free.
You can do it if you have the techie savvy, which those guys do.
Matt Holrich, if you've got a bit of downtime, would you say that is an easy activity to undertake?
None of these things are really easy, and that's kind of one of the other inconsistencies in Edward Snowden's story, that he can just push a button and get access to this data. That's just not possible as someone who knows how these systems work. And then the other really, the big picture thing is we're all fascinated with what the story, because we've been primed by Hollywood films, such as Enemy of the State, that the U.S. government has this great power. But in reality, the U.S. government's the most restricted country on earth in terms of the police and the intelligence agencies having access to this. And here in Europe, they have much easier way, the police have a much easier way of just walking in and tapping our phones, in some cases without a judge's order at all. And you should really be thinking about what's going on here in Europe as much as you are worried about the NSA.
All right, so civil liberties, due process, you heard the argument from Matt, much greater than it is over in the US than it is here in Europe at times. And yet, this has been a public relations nightmare for the Obama administration.
Absolutely. It's a PR fiasco. There's a parody, a Twitter parody here, account. We can go to it there. It's been around for some time. If you haven't looked at it, do look at it now, because this is the @prism_US, and there you can see in that satire account a little message for who else but Mr. Edward Snowden. You're missing
lots of capital letters
there.
Yeah,
you're missing some awesome photos on Facebook. Log on to Facebook. repeat, please log on to Facebook now. So, of course, the idea of on that Twitter account, which is, I repeat, a satire, we have our dear leader himself laughing his head off with us, and that fake photo, which has been around a long time, that issue about privacy. What a nightmare for the legislation, of course, if anyone wants to get around to legislating on any of this.
All right, Nicholas Rushworth, I want to thank you very much. I know you'll be back later for more media, media buzz, media watch. We were talking just now about the issue of how much in Europe, Stéphane Grumback, we're good or not when it comes to monitoring data. And it's going to be an important issue coming up because we're entering into free trade talks now between the US and the European Union. And listening to the conversation, you wonder who's got the better rules when it comes to protecting civil liberties and in terms of making up the rules of the game when it comes to things like cyber commerce.
So one thing is the rules. So Europe is advocating rules. I have some doubts about the right to be forgotten and essentially those systems that would make your own NSA at home, which wouldn't be NSA, of course, but it would be just saving tremendous amount of data that you access on Facebook or Twitter, and you would just save it. The current situation is that when you go on Facebook or when you go on Twitter, the data is on their servers and you don't keep it. If you do keep it, then you have a tremendous amount of data, and there is no way for Facebook to remove it. So the right to be forgotten is, to my opinion, an illusion. It's impossible to implement. Now, talking about regulations in Europe and the access to data, the thing is that Europe doesn't have the data because European citizens, they use Facebook, they use Twitter, they use Google, they use American systems. And not only do they use American system, but they use only one system. Essentially, Facebook and Google, they have essentially more than 90% of the market. So one company for social network. And all this data goes to the US. If you look at China, for instance, there would be several companies and they would be national companies. But if you don't have to look at China, if you look at Korea or Japan, they also use national systems.
So Ashib Yamou, is the answer, listening here, to have European rivals to these US companies?
Yes, I think also that the right to be forgotten is quite impossible. But the right on the property right on our data still exists, and I think that we can wait from a European institution, from our national member state institution, that they protect this right of property on our data, and how that we have to be very aware of what can be done with data when we are running.
Which brings us to the subject of Brussels. Guillaume Gralet, as you may know, there are 27 nations in the European Union. Are they all singing from the same hymn sheet on this story?
No, of course not. And then France has got some particularities. You know that France loves to tax everything, and data is considered as a new oil. So because it's something that is worth some money, France will want to tax this data. So the 27 will take time to agree on everything, but it's worth the debate. And I really think that data is worth some money. So we might see a self-consciousness on the data. You know, I just tried a new gadget whose name is Up. It's made by the American company Jobon, and it will look at all the efforts you do every day, all the meters, and it's very personal. So I want to have control on this, and I think that's going to be a huge debate.
France's information and privacy watchdog, the CNIL, not waiting for Brussels. It started its own investigation into Google.
CNIL is giving Google 3 months to comply with the French law on several aspects. First, to clarify for which precise purposes they are collecting personal data of their users. Second, to give a legal basis to the combination of data they make between all the Google Galaxy services.
Matt Holridge, how's that going to fly, that effort?
Oh, well, Google has an awful lot of leverage in combating type of public inquisition exercises. So it's really up to Google to decide if they wish to comply and how they wish to comply.
It's up to Google on its own.
Well, they can always enforce the fact, or use the fact that there are millions of French citizens, and of course all over the world, using Google services and dependent on Google services. We are dependent on them. So you can't just turn off Google, then your citizens will storm the city hall if you try that.
All right, so Google, in Matt's opinion, bigger than the French state, at least in this battle. I want to thank you, Matt, for joining us from Amsterdam. I want to thank Archip Mou, Guillaume Calais. I also want to thank Stéphane Grumbach. Thank you for joining us here for the France 24 debate.